Welcome back, everybody. The Degenerates. You are the official first episode of 2025 for us. Although we did shoot a little bit, I've shot some content here and there. But like a first official guest, that's really awesome. Today we have Sean Salvaje.
Yes.
With us. You got to tell us about you.
Damn, you said it right.
Right?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I get salvaje a lot, and I'm like, what? That sounds awful.
Salvaje.
Salvaje.
Yeah. Is it salvaje or salvaje?
Salvaje.
Right,
but
perfect.
I break it down phonetically for people,
got it.
It's salvaje.
Yeah. That's great. Tell us about yourself.
Well, I'm a native Tejana. It's hard to just like come off the bat. I was a military photojournalist for a number of years. I did that for about 12 years. Now I'm here. I'm back home in Texas. My last assignment was out of New York. I worked for a forward arm of the Pentagon in New York City. We did a lot of media brokerage. So watching what's happening right now is really interesting. Like the content that you're creating, the work that you're doing is gonna be the future, to be honest. Like I think it's gonna be the future of journalism. I think that you've seen like social media influencers, micro influencers, and I think journalism overall, like media, has lost a lot of public trust, and we're gonna start to see independent thought leaders amongst the people, and that now everyone has an opportunity to be a broadcaster, which could be scary for some, but also super empowering for the people. So I'm kind of excited about it, especially like what I love about your podcast and when I first found your content was like the story that you did about going back to Mexico.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it was just so beautiful. And it was like, damn, I don't get to see content like that often on my own, socials, because the algorithm hasn't prioritized it for me. And have we historically had the resources to be able to do it? No.
Right.
You have to have a lot of money to be in broadcast news.
Yeah.
That's how and even when I was working for the Pentagon, it was like, damn, this shit is tough. I'm
hard.
like working for the top level of the government. I'm having a hard time talking to y'all. Yeah.
And bureaucracy is a big part of the Pentagon afterwards too. So there was
that
red tape, yeah.
Right, because I was like younger in the field. I'm much older now, but at the time it was my early 20s, and that was like 10, 15 years ago. Maybe 20 years ago. Getting too old, but we
no such thing. No such thing.
Especially when you're Latino.
You look fantastic. You look great.
But like what I was noticing then was this trend, and it was difficult. Why were we out there? Because the Pentagon officials at the time had noticed that having conversations with our legislators was ineffective in D.C., which you think you're in the same building or close to each other, in Crystal City, Washington, D.C. You think you can just knock on doors and talk to legislators, but a lot of our people were having a hard time communicating the stories of like the everyday soldier, the everyday airman, the everyday warrior, and how they were contributing, where they came from. Like so many Latinos are in the military, a lot of Tejanos, a lot from California. And we weren't being able to communicate with our legislators in DC. The best way to get to them was actually through New York, through the media. So, and we're finding that was like 20 years ago. Now look at how it's influenced, like Joe Rogan influenced an entire election,
right?
and a bro-oligarchy that has developed.
Bro-oligarchy is good.
Yeah, they were all on these podcasts. Like we saw this all coming over time. So I always say, if you can see it coming over time, if it's predictable, you can adjust fire. Right. So, but I left that. I retired out of the military. They medically retired me, so I'm a medically retired disabled vet, and they weren't sure exactly what was going on towards the end. I had like symptoms of a stroke, and I actually, as verbal as I am, I had like lost speech and was slurring words, lost communication, have some neuropathy issues, and some crazy chronic migraines is what they called it. Okay. And their solution was I had really great docs because I was in New York City. Right. So the doc at NYU, who was a neurologist, was like, I have to level with you. There's a lot about the human brain we don't understand. Here's what we can do. Let's try a couple different medications to see how that can maybe affect your performance or if it helps at all. So he wanted to do like little roulette of like different medications without knowing specifically which ones would help. And then also offered, he was like, we can also biopsy your brain, which is like they're going to slice into your brain, take a little piece out and study it. And I just thought, like, what, whoa, you're telling me you don't know a lot about neuroscience, but you want me to let you cut into my brain. Like, and we all know you're one of the best docs. So I like put the no, that was a no.
You pumped the brakes.
That was a hard pass. And I went back to a plant that I had grown up around. You know, I grew up in the projects for a part of my time. I grew up in the hood, and cannabis, marijuana was always like something that the community was using, some too much to hide from problems, but many to self-treat. Right. And even if you weren't in the projects in Mexico, we had the plant, we were using it in tinctures, medicines. Like, it's been a part of indigenous culture for a really long time. So I tried cannabis and it solved the problems. It blew my mind. And then I really got into the research of what is the deal with prohibition? What are those early roots? And learned a lot. A lot of it actually has to do with being Mexicano. So now I went from working with Uncle Sam, now working in cannabis and psychedelics. So
what a transition.
Yeah.
What city did you grow up in that you said that you grew up in the projects?
So I grew up in the Panhandle, actually, up north in North Texas. So my parents split up, and I grew up split between two houses between Minnesota and Texas. So my dad is a gringo. I used to, like, when I was really little, used to say I was a Chicanqui, and people were like, what is that? What is a Chicanqui? And I was like, I'm half Chicana, I'm half honky. And I didn't know, like,
that's funny.
You know, it's the 80s, they say that stuff.
Yeah.
So I didn't know what, you know, Chicana or honky was. I just knew I was from both, and made up this Chicanqui.
That's good, though. That's good.
So my dad was up in Minnesota, but I bopped around Texas a lot. Like, I like to say my family's so dramatic, you know, on the Mexican side, that they had to go from the valley all the way to the Panhandle. Like, they had to split up that much just from the drama. Right. So we covered from Panhandle all the way down to the valley. And then I grew up in the projects up in North Texas, so where, you know, old Jim Crow South was really present. Oh. And still, like, in the 90s and 2000s, I know a lot of people think that the Jim Crow South was a part of after Reconstruction era, but that still very much was a part of our very recent history, and only now we're starting to really think about it. For
sure. I give this lecture to young people. Sorry, don't mean to cut you off, but I give the lecture to young people about how the Reagan era really affected low-income neighborhoods in major cities. So it makes sense why Jim Crow still has remnants in smaller towns.
Exactly.
As opposed to the Reaganomics that really, you know, impacted a lot of like bigger cities.
So you're looking at Reaganomics with big cities, and then you're looking at what followed after, also in the 90s, even under the Clinton administration, even with President Joe Biden. And just like a disclaimer up front, because I was in the military, I worked under 3 different administrations. So I worked for Bush, Obama, and Trump. Because you don't get a choice. Like, you're there to serve the nation. Correct. And it doesn't matter who holds the office. Yeah.
It's not a partisan arm.
Yeah, we're supposed to be a level of neutrality. Is that still happening? I am very concerned. Yeah. Who knows? We got some red flags. But
so I've got a couple questions. First off, thank you for shouting out that you watched our content and that you and that it really resonated with you. That means a lot to us, because we, for a long time, going back to your point about mainstream media, how hard it is to get out there, how hard it is to get your thoughts out there as somebody that doesn't have any kind of like legacy in media in general. That means a lot to us, because we started from nothing. I had a media company, and I did like photography and video for a lot of people in Houston. And then I was like, you know what, let me just like try my hand in it. And I invested a lot of money into trying to make sure that we can get something like this going. And then the goal was just to build community. And at first we just wanted to shit talk, but then eventually we got to the point where we were like, oh no, we should probably start like highlighting our experiences and things that we've gone through. And that video was actually the first video that really like broke us out and like gave us a lot of opportunity. So it didn't go like mega viral to where we're all of a sudden seeing like this great enormous success, but it got it got us enough of attention that now I can reach out to people, and they're much more willing to say, yeah, I'll sit down with you. And you're kind of proof of that. Sure. So thank you so much for that. That really does mean a lot to us. I really like what you said. You said independent thought leader. That's going on my resume from now on. I'm like, I never classified myself as that, but from now on, like, I'm independent thought leader is what my.
I think there's something to be said about like starting from shit talking too, though. Yeah. Because as I have like been involved in different projects, whether it was in cannabis, whether it was for the military, whether as a journalist, or I did also before going all the way full throttle in cannabis, because you can't just go straight in.
Right.
I was a business consultant out in New York. And there's something to be said about noticing a problem, talking shit about it for a while, and like gathering around the water cooler. But then you have to get to a point where you're like, hey, so what are we gonna do about that?
Yeah. We're done. We're done. We're done talking about or like making fun of it or being lighthearted.
And sometimes you have to, man, because if you don't laugh, you're gonna cry.
For me, it was like self-deprecation. It's like you have to. There's something. There's probably on a psychological level, right? There's like a certain level of emotional intelligence that you have whenever you're willing to be self-deprecating, because you understand that there's a problem, you're willing to make fun of it, and whether it really affects you or like it's neutral or whatever it is, it shows that you've come to terms with a little bit of like the reality that's going on, as opposed to just acting like it doesn't exist, right? So, and then that seems to be a problem that our community suffers with a lot, or just in general, or maybe not even our community, maybe just low income communities in general.
Maybe it's just communities that are facing tough times, because I think tough times will make you like straighten the lip a little bit. Yeah.
So that is kind of how we started. And I'm proud of it, but I really like your terminology. I like the recognition that it takes coming from that to be able to kind of have an impactful voice, or at least at least have some credence to your voice whenever you're talking about it.
I think it's a huge difference. Like, I think that'll be something that we learn to distinguish with thought leaders is who's speaking from a lived experience, and then who's just using ChatGPT to come up with whatever talking points are trendy right now to slap the audio on it and get their views, and there's really no substance. Right.
I think that whenever you were talking about independent thought leaders and like that being the future, I believe you, because I think that it is the future, and I'd like to put my voice out there. This is what we're doing. I'd like to build, we've already had a previous conversation where we're trying to really highly emphasize the importance of community and trying to build a community from the ground up in a grassroots level. And I'm really invested in that. But I also get afraid that with that comes the ChatGPT, hijacking of the algorithm of something that seems organic. You know what I mean?
So the algorithm's already hijacked.
Yeah.
Because Meta owns it.
Right.
But in whoever, general, depending on what platform.
In general, I think...
But I hear what you're saying.
I think there's some... If there's any way that... Just my experience, I want to believe that a really great voice, a really great content, really great delivery, and really like masterful storytelling will like pierce through it. I'd like to think that video that you saw was probably like a small portion of it. There's a video about my father that I think did that same thing. I have another video coming out about my mother where I'm trying to kind of like dive into that kind of art, more art-based
storytelling.
Storytelling. I always tell people that's where I see my function as, right? That people have told me before, you should be a politician, you should be a lobbyist, you should be, because you're articulate and you can get your point across, and you're very amicable. You can be in rooms and you don't feel intimidated by all these things. Where
do we get that from? Because I have that
I have
thing
no idea.
too.
I have no idea. I have a theory about me, but I've always been told that. I tell people, it's just not where my function is. I like being an artist. I like feeling like something didn't exist before I put my brain into it. I like knowing that I'm channeling something that can be transcendent, as opposed to, for lack of a better term, like binary in the sense of like it just lives in a paragraph in a history book. Even though it could be impactful too, right? I think both are necessary.
But there's no color in those books. Yeah, we know what that is.
But for me, I feel very powerful knowing that I created something that didn't exist and that I'm channeling in. I'm trying to tap into, whether it's successful or not, I'm trying my best to tap into an emotion that can really live beyond myself, my experience, my time frame, and that could really, really, really transcend. I feel that way when I listen to like certain music, or I feel like that way when I watch a certain movie, or I feel that way when I look at certain photography, right? Really art in general.
Yeah. Evoking emotion. Yeah,
I think art does I don't think anything matches up to the level of like psyche in like it just taps into the human condition Nietzsche so much more. Yeah,
Nietzsche said that.
Nietzsche so much better.
Was like, art is beautiful, music is transcendent, because it does something that speaks to the soul. And there's definitely something about putting the visuals and the voice together that has a huge impact. Yeah. And especially with independent thought leadership, like if we think about, let's just think about human tribes and civilizations. Like, I know this is not what we signed up to talk about.
It's okay,
like,
I'm here for it.
Well, let's think about it. Like, as tribes, then we expanded into civilizations. And when we were in tribes, we told each other stories, and we knew each other's stories, and we knew each other's history, like historia. It's a thing, like story.
Right.
So then after that, we get into these cities, and we're still sharing our stories with smaller groups within, but the mass communication had to come from the government.
Sure.
Monarchs at the time. Or just word of mouth, like whatever the people were saying was going on. But it wasn't like we had broadcast news back in the Renaissance. So they had ways of disseminating news and information.
And that was problematic also. Everything has its problems.
Well, because it's all like hearsay at that stage.
Yeah.
Then we get to the printing press, and we get printed media, and we get broadcast media, and all that stuff. Then we get the internet. Well, now here we are, back at the beginning, where we can get our information from each other, and we can get back to almost being like a tribe again, a community, if we choose to listen to each other. One thing I've noticed that we're really doing is fighting with each other. And
of course.
Like this whole election just was like, the height of nonsense to me. Just
I agree.
A bunch of bullshit from everybody's mouth.
I agree.
No real progress. And now look at...
From both sides, yeah.
Yeah, from both, exactly. I have my issues with both. Mostly, especially because like when we look at it, given the industry that I work in cannabis, I have to look at objectively what were the policy positions that they took, and then what did they actually execute on.
Correct.
And I do use cannabis as my litmus test because it does have a historical tie. Like it is a big part of actually what was helping to fund our founding of this nation. And then also a huge, surprise.
Yeah, so you're going to put me on game today. Hey, before we get there, because I'm gonna ask you so many questions about that. I, like you, grew up in a bad neighborhood, or not a bad neighborhood. I grew up in a low-income neighborhood. A tough neighborhood. Second Ward, Houston is where I'm from. Right there on the east side of downtown.
Yeah, we're like big projects area. Yeah. We were like country folk.
Yeah. No. Well, I was like, what you think of whenever you think of like an inner city neighborhood is essentially like minus the New York factor, where it's like
Well, New York in the 90s was a whole nother thing.
Right.
It's not like that anymore. New York is beautiful.
But that's essentially where I grew up. So I've definitely been around cannabis. I've been around weed. I've been around people. I have a lot of thoughts about it. But not thoughts in the sense that I am against it or anything like that. I just have a lot of I guess firsthand accounts as to why a lot of the legislation, doesn't really make any sense. But I also don't know that much about it. I think that it's not something that I've had a great interest in. I'll tie this back into like part of what your question earlier about, what do you think makes us this way? Why do you? Because you and I are pretty similar in that sense. It seems like, I think I got bitten by the bug of art very early on, at like 13, 14 years old. I became a professional dancer at 15, so I started touring very, very, very early on, and it was essentially my muse, and it really took me a lot of places. Before that, I was your run-of-the-mill story of like inner city kid, right? We're talking about like late 90s, early 2000s. I'm thinking like we were dressing in like South Pole jeans and white t-shirts, and you know, just the whole hip-hop gambit there.
Yeah.
I think I didn't really have a purpose until I found art, and I think had it not been that, I think I would have just probably experienced weed in the same way that everybody else experiences weed, and then not been able to discern how it has its ties in other places and the political implications of it overall. But I think having not participated, or at least having not been engulfed by it in the same way that my friends were, I think that it really probably gave me a 30,000 foot view of it. I've smoked before. I like smoking, or I like just THC in general, you know, just cannabis in general. It's not a big part of my life. I think I probably drink more than I take any kind of cannabis or THC in general, but it's completely destigmatized in my brain. Like for me in my brain, the way that I see it isn't really as a caricature the way that it
D.A.R.E.
gets.
This is your brain on drugs.
Yeah.
Right.
So I actually have a lot of funny stories about D.A.R.E. But yeah. Like it doesn't necessarily
Equating cannabis to heroin.
It's crazy.
Nonsensical.
It's insane.
It's not even scientific.
It's insane. Yeah.
There's no foundation for any of that
at all.
Science. Right. They made that shit up. It's literally propaganda.
Before you get into your spiel, because I know that it's coming, and I am actually like really curious about it. I purposely did not do any research. Like usually I know the guests that I have on, and I'm like, okay, let me like do some research so that I can like, you know, if I want to have a thought-provoking conversation, maybe I can get it from them or whatever. Or I can know what to ask so that we can lead you can have a jumping off point from a previous conversation that I've already had. But I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go in this like blind, because even though I know I have a lot of experiences with weed in my neighborhood and like all these things, I also don't know a lot about it. So I want you to tell me, and I want you to get like my reaction. But before we get there, you said that you were in New York. I'm a New York junkie.
Are you?
Where did you live in New York?
Oh my God, I was spoiled. I don't know why I left.
You lived in Manhattan?
I mean, I love Texas. Of course, I love Texas, and I'm a Tejana, so of course I had to come back home and fight for my people. But New York, I lived in Queens, but I didn't live in Queens. It was like Queens, but not. So I was in LIC. It's called Long Island City, and people are like, Long Island?
Yeah.
So the old trains, right, they used to go through LIC, and then they would go into Long Island. Long Island City was a whole bunch of warehouses like 20 years ago, but then it's the most beautiful parks. It's the view of Manhattan. It's the tall building. So
that's your favorite borough then, is Queens?
Shit. Going from the projects to looking at being on floor 22, looking down and being like, holy hell, I'm in the clouds.
Oh,
like,
man, and that skyline from there is
gorgeous. It was gorgeous.
Right?
Yeah,
like
my sons had a view of all of New York City. So I used to tell, people would be like, oh, you weren't in the city, you're not in Manhattan. I'm like, honey, I'm 5 minutes away from downtown. You have to go like north to south. That's 30 minutes for you.
Yeah.
I live here. I have the view. What are you? You're in the mess.
Yeah, I think Williamsburg probably just has like a more centered view of the city.
I like Williamsburg.
Yeah, but
I think once you end up one spot, though, you're like, Queens, we represent Queens.
I get it. I think
but Brooklyn has my heart too,
Yeah, I like Brooklyn a lot. If I were to live somewhere, I'd probably live in Brooklyn. But I don't discriminate.
Brooklyn's not Brooklyn though anymore, right?
Yeah, I know it's not.
Yeah, it's not what it used to be.
But I mean, like Harlem's got some spots. The Bronx got some spots.
Harlem is holding on. The Bronx holding on. Spanish Harlem.
Spanish Harlem is so cool.
It's the best,
man.
Oh
my God, it's so nice up there. And I just like the city as a whole. You used to go in the
summer and open a fire hydrant and have a good time. And
such a great time.
And have paleteros selling
the
things.
raza up there is so good too. It's like so nice. Like
that was the thing. Like, so I'm Mexicana. I'm Mexican American.
Yeah, so am I.
And we're from Texas.
I was born in Monterrey too. So, but I was raised here.
But then being out there with the Dominicans and
Puerto
the Cubans and the Puerto Ricans,
it's so nice.
Man, I was like, oh man, I'm sad. There's definitely no good Mexican food out in New York.
Yeah.
We're not out there. But the Dominicans, the Cubans, all of our island brothers, man, they really embrace. I mean, of course, the island brothers. I can't stay away from them.
I know,
I'm like,
man.
of course, they embraced it.
Yeah,
I was excited
of course.
Sorry.
It's okay. Hey, there's nothing to apologize for, man. It's not like I'm complaining about the Boricuas.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not like So, or the Dominicans, it's like, there's
it's also great
no
because the accent is so different. So they're speaking Spanish. I'm like, I have no clue
Ya
what
tú
you're
sabes,
saying.
ya tú sabes. Yeah, you're just like, okay, cool. No, I really enjoy New York. The bodegas up there. Oh my God, just like the whole community vibe up there that they have is so nice.
It's family, it's community.
Uh-huh.
I think that's what I loved about New York. It's what I miss. It's what, like, honestly, New York was one of the first times. So I'm at Tejana. I'm from here. These are like my bloodline is native to the northern Mexico, Texas region. Yeah, so we're from here, really from here.
For real, yeah.
Right. That's why when they're like, go back, I'm like, what? We're here.
Yeah.
This is us.
Yeah.
So, but I never, because the way everything was with Texas and New Jim Crow South, I never felt at home in my own land. So when I went to New York, I cried, man, because when I finally got there, spent a week or so, and it was never a dream for me to live in New York. I was always like, no way. It's too, they're too crazy out there. It's too much. But then you get there and the community embraces you. You can be anybody from anywhere and have a dream and live in New York, and people will let you respect your hustle as long as you're like doing your thing and putting it down.
Yeah, I love it.
If you're full of shit, they're gonna call you out. But
for real.
Right. And I love that too.
Love that too.
We need that. We need more of that.
I have a dream of living in New York as an artist also. But I just frequent a lot. I used to go like 4 or 5 times a year.
Yeah, I want to get my apartment. I wish I could get it back.
Last year was the first year I didn't go because I was here in Austin. I was building roots here, and I had a lot to do and things like that. But I'm planning on going back in the summer because I'm like, oh my God, I'm craving it so bad.
Yeah.
But anyway, I know that was a
no.
New
my
York,
boys want that too. I know. We'll digress all the way.
Yeah.
Hey, we could talk about New York, cannabis.
Yeah. For sure. Okay, walk me through it. Texas. Like, what's a good jumping off point? If we were going to talk about cannabis in general, is it better to start off with the history of cannabis, the prohibition side, and then work our way up to Texas? Or is it better to start in Texas and then like hint at what was going on in the past? So you tell me.
Prohibition, interestingly enough, like folks think that federal prohibition just came up.
Right.
It really was driven largely by what was happening on the border with Mexico and Texas.
And this is prohibition in the 20s, you mean?
Yeah, this is, it's crazy. So,
because a lot of people register prohibition as alcohol, as like the ban on alcohol,
they
and
did
the bootlegging.
Alcohol, and then after alcohol, we can look at prohibition of alcohol, and there are a lot of parallels to cannabis prohibition. Essentially, when alcohol prohibition ended up the way that it did, a bloody mess, because you make something illegal, you actually drive up the value for the illicit market.
On the black market,
and
which is what happened.
Exactly. And then you have actors like Al Capone, figures like that,
Chicago's
who develop the level of resource, and then you make the product that they are offering even more illicit, which drives up the value.
And then there's no regulation. So there's a danger to that.
So you're giving them a lot of, the no regulation is a real thing. That's a seriously modern issue.
For sure.
But keeping it prohibited didn't solve any problems, made things significantly worse. And then after they realized that and started to walk it back from the teetotaler movement, it was a political movement that kind of took over the nation and then pushed more of prohibition. Like, we were torn on it with alcohol. After prohibition ended, they want to give alcohol back. Who's the next bad guy we can have? And it was cannabis, which was odd because cannabis leading up until that point, actually, like the United States. So cannabis seeds came to the United States. Obviously, we all know about like Maui Wowie and the Afghan Kush coming from the 70s. That's not when it first arrived, friends. Like the 70s, and that's not, I get it. Like
when I first think about weed, I just think about like Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
I think about like
and
purple.
That's when weed came to America, man. No. So cannabis was used in like ancient China and also grows in like the Hindu Kush and those regions. and has been an herbal plant. It was even used in Judaism. There are some like ancient Christian and Jewish ruins where they found the ashes and burning of cannabis plants that were used in the censers, the things where they burn the incense in religious ceremonies. So even in Jewish ceremonies, like Jesus very well could have been cool with Kush. Yeah. And I mean, if you think about it, some of that, man, just love each other. That sounds pretty stoner conversation. Not alleging that Jesus was a stoner, but it is actually likely that cannabis was used ceremoniously in those times.
I think it's undisputable now at this point that psychedelics and just psyche,
entheogens,
correct, have been part of religious tradition and tribal tradition for millennia at this point. Or
since we were,
or centuries, better part.
Even before language, probably. Correct. We were eating things that we found, like mushrooms.
Yeah, I think at this point it's really undisputed. So that there should really be no nobody up in arms about that. Really,
no, but they are though, and that's it. That is so. Like when we look at, so it came to the U.S. from Asia, and it came through the Spanish colonizers and. Because we were using hemp. The hemp they were using in all of the sails and all of the roads, like all of those boats and ships were using hemp to create the fabric for the sails. And when we originally...
Which is very sturdy, by the way. Hemp is like the most sturdy material.
And not only that, but also leading up to the Marijuana Tax Act in 1937, so we went all the way back to the colonial days. Came over and indigenous people were already using things like, we had psilocybin in Mexico. We had all of that.
Ayahuasca, all that jazz.
Exactly. And then also we have, when cannabis comes over, indigenous folks are already using native plants. So they're incorporating it into indigenous ceremony and practice because they understand it to be an herbal medicine from the earth.
Correct.
So it becomes a part of our indigenous culture and curanderismo, a lot of natural healing, but not only in Mexico and Latin American countries, also still Caribbean, in the Asian area, Asia region, and yes, in Africa also major roots with slave trade, still major roots there where they were putting seeds in hair, bringing it over.
It evolves a little bit once it hits different territories. I think if it gets to the Gulf, you get to New Orleans, you get to the Cajun, you get to voodoo, you get to a lot of it just has a lot of entanglement.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just trying to and everywhere else
so
where I see
maybe the big idea is that people naturally were attracted to this plant that was providing medicinal relief for many things, joint pain, etc. I know a lot of indigenous healers, curanderas, and the modern healers still use cannabis oil created in an alcohol tincture to treat illnesses, by the village instead of,
mind you,
pharmaceutically.
The way that we found opiates was because they were using it in curanderismo, essentially, just to use a Latin term.
Chinese medicine.
They were, and that's how they found that it had pain killing attributes, right?
So we have all these great natural things, and cannabis feels like it's still very close to that. But then we had this use of the plant specifically by Mexicans in the early 1900s, and this was after the Mexican-American War. So what happens in this region of the country, like Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, California,
Southwest,
all of this was Mexico. Then the United States manifest destiny. They wanted more. Texas, the Republic of Texas, started because there were Anglo settlers from the Americas, which Mexico, the country of Mexico, had formed after the rebellion
the French
from
Revolution,
Spain, right? So Mexico had formed, and the Anglo settlers came through Texas, wanted to settle some of the land, and instead, this battle started because they kept pushing their land borders and they wanted to keep slaves.
Right.
And Mexico had already outlawed it.
So it was a capitalistic venture. I always have to say that because whenever people talk about slavery, I always have to bring up the fact that anytime somebody wants to keep slaves, aside from the fact that it's an immoral position,
right,
it is also a capitalistic venture that they're talking
money.
about. They're not talking about their undying need to just own people.
Right.
They're talking about free labor. They're talking about like money, a money making enterprise, right?
They don't see them as people.
Yeah, I have to always bring that up because I assume that you can speak on this more, but I do know that the stigmatization and the widespread nationwide effort propaganda to villainize or create a caricature of the marijuana smoker, the marijuana person.
I mean, they literally said degenerate Mexicans.
Correct.
That's also, I kind of thought your podcast title was.
Got it. I can explain my podcast title, but it kind of ties into that because...
Well, we've been called degenerates from day one because we were here on our own land and they wanted it.
Right.
So the best way to take what is not yours is to make enemy or demean or dehumanize anything that stands against you.
Right.
And they did that. Like a lot of folks ask, well, why don't we have a whole lot of reservations for Native Americans in Texas? Or why don't Tejanos know that they're indigenous? Because they erased us.
Right.
They moved us to the other states, especially Oklahoma. They got rid of us from these areas, or they massacred us, or they lynched us in the 30s and 40s.
That's the one thing that people don't know about.
That
a lot of people don't know that lynching happened to Hispanics and Latinos and Texans, Chicanos. Like, it happened to us.
Recent history.
100%.
That's my grandmother and my great grandmother.
Yeah, it was real. It was real. And I have a segment on this podcast called Identity Crisis where I want to dive into that, but I want to attack it in a very specific way. Anyway, I bring all the capitalism into it because as I understand it, and again, you can speak on this more eloquently. The alcohol industry post-prohibition was such a strong lobby and such a strong money-making machine that in the same way that I assume that the nicotine industry was also a big part of this.
Sure,
also.
Alcohol and tobacco have a lot of power, or they did.
They wanted to caricaturize the marijuana smoker, the weed in general, because of their capitalistic ventures. It was, we want to make as much money as possible, and we want to destroy a sector of a potential
competitor.
A potential competitor that can cannibalize our consumer base.
So we're seeing that right now. Yeah. That's like in real time. So when it comes to like the original prohibition, that may have played a big part. Who was getting what money where, especially because once the alcohol industry was formed, we already know alcohol, gambling, and underground crime networks and the U.S. government. They've all done deals together.
Yeah. So they've been aware of each other for a while,
that they haven't all been in cahoots at times. Even though the government is designed to create the law and enforce the law, we are well aware as the American public that counterintelligence operations and other operations, FBI operations, and also politicians, senators, legislators from the 60s and 70s just taking money under the table. You don't even have to have a whole agency to do it back then.
Over the table.
People, right?
Over the table.
Just calling it something else. The way, however you structure it to fit inside the business loophole. But they were a part of that prohibition. That was a part of it, but really Henry Anslinger, a lot of it was racially motivated, and it was racially motivated specifically because of land rights and wanting to make sure that we establish control over the Republic of Texas, which had become a state by that point. Like when we think about the Republic of Texas and then because after Texas, that's when all the rest of it comes. That's when California and all the rest of the American Southwest comes. Well, and they get all of that land. It starts there, and then it just dominoes. And Mexico goes from this whole thing to what it is now.
Right.
And still in today's era, we're having issues with the border. And I don't think it's that we have massive issues with the border. I think it's that as long as we position that we have issues with the border,
it's a political.
Then we can justify, like right now, military action is being taken on both sides. And yes, cartels are something we do need to be concerned about.
Of course.
Have to say, as an operator in cannabis and psychedelics, if we hadn't started this nonsense with cannabis, which by the way, white Americans also were using cannabis in the early 1900s There are literally bottles of tinctures that they used to sell at the apothecaries before we had things like pharmacies and health insurance and all of these, the way that our modern healthcare system is now. Before that, we had these apothecaries, and everyone was using cannabis for joint relief or other, herbal remedies. In 1937, because we had all of this political strife and the 30s and 40s, they're lynching Mexicanos. We're talking about still talking about Reconstruction.
Yeah, this post depression,
right?
Yeah.
We're talking about black jazz musicians they brought into the mix, and it's like, guys, again, the jazz music was such a big deal.
There goes the villainization that I'm talking about.
Well, because they didn't want all that rock and roll and that jazz, that devil music.
They don't want it. They just don't want their children involved in these kinds of like counterculture kind of ways,
because what's so crazy about that is that's all a brainwashing, because 100%. The plant is truly a nutraceutical. Like it does a lot of good things. The plant is the
victim here.
Exactly. And the people are the victims, because we used to have this over the counter. You can grow this in your backyard.
Yeah.
Know exactly what's in it. Know that you didn't use pesticides.
Yeah.
Harvest it and treat your depression, your anxiety, your migraine, whatever the ailment is. You can probably find a solution using this plant or some other natural remedy.
Right.
And I'm all about, I believe in docs. I believe in science. And I understand for some conditions, pharmaceuticals are necessary.
Yeah.
But if we're looking at the industry, the pharmaceutical industry, that is not necessary. And the reason that this prohibition, I think, continues is because of alcohol, tobacco, and pharmaceutical industry making sure that the narrative that it is a dangerous drug,
of course,
for degenerate people pervades what is going to end up happening. So what do we have right now in Texas? We're facing like SB3, which is
talk about that. I don't know what
bill.
That is. What is that? Talk to us.
SB3, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick introduced SB3. Actually, he hasn't introduced it. No one's seen the text. I even looked this morning to see if there was anything before coming to visit with you. We haven't seen this bill yet, so it's not been written. They're already going through SB2, which is the school voucher bill.
Okay.
SB3 is Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick and Senator Charles Perry, I think, will be the author on this one. It's a bill to ban all THC in Texas.
Oh, wow.
Well, what do we have right now in Texas? We have a low-dose medical program that is really inefficient, that legislators have really, because of the cap that they've put on it, it can't actually serve a lot of patients, because you're not going to pay $70 for a gummy that is so low dose, it's not helpful.
Right.
And also dosage really depends on the individual. Like I could probably eat like a whole bag of these and be fine. Do I recommend that for everybody? Absolutely not. Mm-hmm. Like most people should start with half of a gummy. It depends on your tolerance body level, system. Yeah, your tolerance level and your system. Like there are studies that were done recently where we're finding a correlation between if you have PTSD, we all have this thing in our body called an endocannabinoid system. So we actually all have a body system, like your cardiovascular system. We all have one called the endocannabinoid system. Whether you like cannabis or not, physically, you have an endocannabinoid system. Cannabinoids are like released in breast milk, like after birth when you're feeding the baby. They're receiving cannabinoids as part of the bonding process with mom and baby. It helps, like it facilitates oxytocin transfers and all of this stuff. It's all part of that. So cool. We have a system in our body designed for cannabinoids. What they're finding with like PTSD is that those people are exhibiting an abundance of receptors for the CB1, CB2 receptor, which is what THC activates. They're finding that those people who have extreme bouts of depression or PTSD have more receptors, which would mean that if they have more receptors but no chemical, then they have a deficiency likely of cannabinoids. And that by treating that using cannabis, giving people cannabinoids, it alleviates a lot of the symptoms. So that's probably why I can eat a whole bunch of these and still be level, because I physiologically need more than what someone else might, because they don't have all of those open receptors.
Wow.
So there's still a lot of science that we need to develop. And the longer we have prohibition, and the stigma, especially because in Latino culture, coming out about being in this industry was terrifying, really, as a Latina more than anything else, because they made it so bad for us. Like, they convinced us that we were criminals, that if we participated in any consumption of this medicine, that we were criminals, that we were degenerates, that we were hoodlums, like, and that it could be the end of our life. And I do know that for some people who did fall into that world, yes, but that has nothing to do with the plant. That has everything to do with
legislation, political structure,
and also that
system.
has to do with like if the criminal system.
Yeah.
If you oppress the people so much so that there is no way forward for them economically, and they can't put bread on the table for their children, I don't know any one person who really wouldn't break the law to put bread on the table for their children. Sure. Now, should you? No, but it's much easier to judge when you have resources than when you're in the position.
Correct.
So, and that lifestyle leads to that kind of nefarious characters, actors who are just in it for money, and that's not about the plant. That's about drug trafficking.
Right.
That's about underground operations. That's about illegal activities.
I can speak to that a little bit, because that's what I like to call the revolving door of pain. Is really what I label it as, right? Because you're speaking to circumstances that may make somebody
make a choice.
Yeah, that would make somebody make a bad choice, right? And what I say at that point is, if I peel back the layer of like, what is the thing that caused somebody to make this bad choice? Lack of resources, lack of opportunity. But then you also get this really weird thing where it all comes out. This is the artist in me. This is why you'll probably see that this is where I think that this is my function. It all revolves around pain. People feel pain. People don't know where that pain comes from. People feel pain for a multitude of reasons. It's not just the government incited, like, oh, we're oppressing you. It's a multitude of reasons. I made bad decisions. I had a baby early, or whatever. That's why I call it the revolving door. It's like the revolving door of pain. You don't know what to do with that pain. You have to figure out a way to either self-medicate, whatever. And you get caught in this cycle, and then afterwards you have to make decisions based on the circumstances that could have been alleviated by a multitude of factors, the government being one of them, or at least politics and laws being part of it, right? Whether you have an empathetic law versus a law that's meant to criminalize,
most folks
right?
have a boot on their neck,
right?
And that gets tough to navigate.
Yeah. So I register all of that through people are in pain, and we need to alleviate pain, right? And that's not a very that's not a very hard concept to understand, because right now there is a growing constant effort to paint the white community that's affected by opiates as we're just in pain. You know what I mean? They don't get kind of
they're
villainized.
Not criminals.
Right. They're not criminals.
Victims.
They're victims of them
criminals.
being in pain, right?
Right.
And that in essence is the biggest crux that I have with the portrayal of drug use in this country, not just for Latinos, but for the black community.
Opioid crisis being caused by the pharmaceutical industry.
It's not our fault.
That's a mental health issue.
Yeah, it's a mental health issue.
And yeah, it is.
And it is.
So
I agree.
is this other thing, which, by the way, is not an issue, because this is not a dangerous drug.
Right.
You've made it a dangerous.
Right. And to be fair,
categorized
I want to be a little. I'm not trying to play devil's advocate here, but I want to be very clear that it worked. The propagandization.
Oh, it totally worked.
And it worked. Like, my mother used to say, "No te vuelvas marihuano." Like, don't become that kind of a person. It was the thing that people were scared of. And I think looking back on it now, when I've asked my mom, she can tell me of like when the first time that she in Mexico, when she felt how they used to use cannabis and things like that. So she knows about it. In the traditional ways. But the propaganda worked only because she was scared. She was in pain that I would end up arrested. Behind bars. Yeah, you know what I mean?
So they used this thing that the community was using to heal itself and criminalized it. So then the fear, truth be told, coming out and working on the stigma in the Latino community has zero to do with the plant. Mm-hmm. It has everything to do with undoing the fear of arrest.
Correct.
And at this stage, it doesn't matter if you're consuming a plant. The fear of arrest is if you look if you're presenting enough or not. And I know I say that from a place of privilege. But like my grandfather, I mean, look, let's just talk about what's really happening right now with the documentation and being undocumented and then being called illegal or alien to this land, especially as a Tahana. It blows my mind because most of those folks are indigenous. And we're like tripping over, well, Native American Navajo people are being picked up by ICE or being questioned by ICE, but they're a Native American, the outrage. Right. And I want to be like, well, my brothers, I'm glad that the Navajo Nation would stand with us, I hope, because so are we, indigenous. Right. Just because you want to put a label on it, Mexican, because of a country, the French, the Spanish.
Nationality.
All of these borders were all drawn after these people. We were already here. Yeah. This was already our medicine. So it becomes really a bigger contentious issue because we were so afraid of marijuana when we were younger, something that culturally was a part of our traditions and healing practices. And we let it be bastardized into this thing that we couldn't go near because we knew I still am afraid driving through Texas sometimes because it takes one cop on a bad day with a bone to pick to decide, well, I think it's probable cause enough, so I'll take you in. And that's scary. Like if you're driving, even if you have documentation, whether you do or you don't, even if you purchase a legal product, which these products are legal in Texas, you run with the fear that law enforcement can arbitrarily choose when they will and will not enforce. And much of that decision making is based on personal bias. It has
100%.
Until we deal with systemic issues and the bias that we built in against Mexicanos and Tejanos, we're going to have to deal with that no matter what.
Black people also.
Yeah. For sure.
Because they...
it goes without saying.
The Black community that really did bear the brunt of the crack epidemic and the
well, and that was sabotage on purpose.
100%,
like we've already seen
100%.
that they came out with that. So for Mexicanos, get rid of cannabis, make it outlaw, make marijuana, like even the use of the word marijuana, even the cannabis industry right now, they won't use it. And they say it's a racial term because Anslinger, wanted to use specifically marijuana to prohibit cannabis, weed. But the thing is, marijuana comes from us. It's like our contribution. It wasn't Anslinger's word. It was ours that they used. It's like when they use Mexican, like it's a dirty word. Right. It's not. I'm proud of that word.
Right.
I'm proud.
I am too.
Right.
Yeah.
Ooh, it gets me.
It gets you going. I can see that. I can see that.
How dare you? How dare you?
Right. It's funny that you thought that our name had to do with kind of like, it ties into it a little bit. Yeah. But
I mean, I didn't, it resonated.
Yeah. Part of the name is to speak to your point, right? I think the weed thing is part of it in peripherally speaking, but we've always been called degenerates, right? In the media, on a political cycle, every 4 years,
with cannabis or without
it, we've just been
demonized our people forever, and it was because of a land grab.
So I wanted to lean into it. I wanted to call myself the degenerate before they did. I wanted to kind of like take it back, so to speak. I wanted to feel like I was ahead of the curve. If I ever gave my opinion and people would come back with like, oh, you're just blah, 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 or you represent this, or go back to your country. But I'd be like, yeah, I'm just going to, lean into it. And then the play on the, like, I guess the phonetic rhyme of generous being right before it, and just kind of like having that juxtaposition felt really very, very powerful to me. And then I also I didn't want our name to be in Spanish. I wanted our name to be in English because we're American and because we're both, we're equally Mexican. I think that I will probably do a lot more things in Spanish. I'm fluent in Spanish, but I wanted to make sure that people knew like we're here and we're not really like planning on going anywhere. We will touch on a lot of different kinds of topics like how we're doing now, but that was essentially the crux of it. But it really stems from the fact that me and my friends, we felt being called a degenerate. Oh, yeah. Whenever we were young, whenever we were kids, by the cops, by other people.
And even if you were like a good kid, I did everything to be perfect then because of that. Because I was hell bent on being the first to get my family out of those spaces. Yeah. Like my grandfather was a rancher, so he wasn't like, yeah, let's go to the hood. Yeah. The way that they imagine these things, like people want to live this life that's so hard on being human. It makes it way harder. The project life is not, yes, do we have community and culture and vibrancy, and do we thrive regardless? Sometimes, yes, we do. But the life of it that's hard. It's hard, really hard on a human mind and a human body. But I love that you fully embraced it. We're all about it. That I took a similar approach with cannabis, because when I realized that I was going to be moving back to Texas, my eyes were wide, and I was like, damn, legalizing Texas is going to be a real task. We're probably going to be the last state, just like with slavery, for, similar reasons.
So what do you, I guess, how can we help? Or how can people watching help?
I think this is helping. Like having the conversation, me having like a little gummy, it being not an issue, and people realizing I'm mostly medicated all the time. It doesn't affect me in the way that it does other people. And I think destigmatizing is about having conversations. So like Tias will come now, the Tias will come, the same Tias before who were like, stay away from it because they were afraid for your safety, really. It had nothing to do with the plant.
Right.
It had everything to do with the police.
100%.
So now these Tias are like, I have joint pain. I have aches, my arthritis, bones. Yeah. Do you have something for me? And I can talk to them about it. I can see, well, what are you looking for? What kind of experience? And you can have a thoughtful conversation where you can explain some of the science. And I think that's the most important thing, especially for our community, because this was taken from us, this thing that we can use to heal ourselves. Like from going to the doc wanted to slice into my brain to having a gummy or a puff of something and being okay. Right. That's a huge jump.
What so education is what people can do, right? So your suggestion is become educated on these things and its history so that you don't get gaslit into thinking that you are something that you're not.
Or even getting gaslit into believing that it's evil, because that was all. If you are worried about the community and you have opinions on what's happening right now, whatever side of the aisle you land on, you have to know the actual history of what has happened to have an informed position. Right. Otherwise, you're just doing what everybody else is doing, which is talking out of your ass.
Or you're carrying somebody else's water.
Exactly. Yeah. And without any merit, that's what's killing me about this everything must be done on merit thing. I agree. Let's look at merit. Let's look at what people have achieved and, how they've been treated.
It's so funny that you say that, because
like I think about your parents actually a little bit.
Like I'm like, I would love to be based on merit. So you should probably give the drug dealer a chance, because they probably have more merit. They know how to run a business better. They know what it means to import, export. Right. These are the people that I know for a fact are better at math than most of the people that are in school for math. That these are the people that I know for a fact can run calculations on the spot. They know what it means to be timely. They know what it means for like things to be off by a certain degree when it comes to like long, big shipments. Not trying to out anybody. I'm just saying, like, when you really think about what it means to be
math in your head like that long enough,
like these people have merit, these people have value, these people can be valuable members of society. And if you're doing things based on merit, then they have, in a lot of ways, maybe not on with legal jargon, right? Maybe not on a legal standpoint, but they have the necessary characteristics to bring value to people on an economic level.
What if we gave folks an opportunity to develop those skills? Like, where else were they going to really develop that skill set? Right. If they had an entrepreneurial mind, but no resource and no opportunity, and a bunch of folks who didn't believe in them and already told them they were criminals. And by the way, if you're going to get harassed by the police anyway, like if you're going to get harassed anyway, you're going to get picked up anyway. Might as well have some coin to be able to bail yourself out. Correct. Because you can do the right thing. I'm not suggesting that we do the wrong things, friends. Like, not at all. Right.
Oh, of course.
We're not suggesting that at all. You can do the right thing. You can be perfect, and you can still end up behind bars. Yeah. Sometimes that's just the way it is. Right. So I understand why some of the street entrepreneurs did what they did. And yeah, they are very resourceful. And if we want to legalize this, we need to bring them into the conversation, because they're going to share a lot of data and information about what worked, what didn't work.
They have the most data.
They have all of the data.
They have all of the data. And the crazy thing is that they don't know that they can negotiate, they can bargain with it.
No, some of them do.
Oh yeah,
some of them do, and they're making some good money now.
Good for them.
Yeah,
good for them.
Those friends,
by and large, though. By and large,
that's the thing, though. They had an opportunity to go into regulated markets.
Right.
Texas now, with what
California,
they're proposing,
Colorado,
right?
Seattle.
So with what Texas is proposing to continue prohibition, you take all of those entrepreneurs, you don't put them into a regulated market, you don't give them a regulated market to help develop. They'll just continue to innovate under the table. Right. So all you're doing.
That's so crazy that you say that, because you're so, like the best entrepreneurs I've ever met were drug dealers. The best innovators that I've ever met were the people that can think on the fly, the people that can come up with these solutions.
Think on their feet or not panic when shit's hitting the fan.
This is so, like, these people have so many great attributes that would make them great business leaders, and they just don't. They've been a victim of circumstance and that revolving door of pain.
And we do have to be respectful. There are some. I do want to be respectful because, to be fair, some people start small, they build a nice enterprise, they're funding themselves, taking care of the community. Some people get approached by bigger operations. Some
and they
that
get bought
are
out,
like the cartels or other, and they're not getting approached, hey, you want to do business? They're getting approached. You know, they're being told, saying, we're doing this.
Or else. Yeah.
So you have to be really mindful about what you're doing. And this is why it's so important, because the cartels that is dangerous. Like when we're killing people and we're harming civilians, honestly, it's bad for business too. If you have a lot of bloodshed and a lot of violence, as a cartel organization,
it perpetuates a stereotype.
Not only does it perpetuate a stereotype, but to be honest, most cartels want to go into legitimate business because that's sustainable income. The longer that you're fighting the feds, the harder it is. And everybody knows, like you see the shows, like everybody jokes about it. There's only one way out of that lifestyle, or two, but really one. You go to jail and you die, or you die. That's how you get out. So why do we want to continue to perpetuate this cycle? We can regulate this in Texas. We can build up a base where we're developing innovations and science to help people address ailments and illnesses first. And then also, if you want an adult, for me, I don't drink alcohol. I have an autoimmune disease. This helps with that. If I can go to a bar and get an infused beverage, which will help me feel good the next day too, I won't have a hangover, but I'll feel elevated. I'll be happy. I can celebrate with my friends who drink and feel great the next day. Like, why aren't we investing in that? This prohibition thing has really gotten to be a very nonsensical point.
So that's your biggest fight. You personally, in your endeavors,
So that's a great question, because I've been having an existential conversation with myself for a while. I was a journalist, and I see that there are stories that need to be told, and I've been getting back behind the lens and telling more of those stories. And right now, yes, it starts with cannabis and psychedelics, because I really believe in the healing. But I do see, like, in the future, of course, I'll be expanding out. Why am I so focused on cannabis and psychedelics? Mostly natural psychedelics, not synthesized ones for me. Right. Although there's some applicability, but I do think, look, if you're synthesizing things, that probably should be run by pharmaceutical industry, because they have certain protocols, processes, scientists,
you want to get
safety.
Pure DMT, it's going to be you probably should get it from somebody that.
But if you're doing, but you should also be allowed to just go have an ayahuasca ceremony with someone who has grown the plant for so many years. And if you choose, the consumer, to take the risk, that's your choice. That's what blows my mind about this. The thing, though, the reality is, it's not actually a red or blue issue in the state of Texas. It's a purple one, because Republicans and Democrats, truthfully, don't really want to ban this, don't really have a problem with it. But we have a very loud minority of constituents, especially up in the Panhandle, who are really shaking the Bible, and they're, saying it's
that Bible.
And I'm trying to figure out how we can reach our friends over there, because it's a lot of misinformation. Like, they're afraid of something that they don't know or understand, and that has a lot to do, when it's religion and race, it's always, you just actually don't know. You've never been in that community, or you never participated. And, you can see it. We can eat the gummies, we can smoke a J, and everyone is just fine. Yeah. I don't know where the whole idea that you would become a maniac. even began, because I understand that we like put all of that media and propaganda out there in the Nixon administration. They were saying reefer madness, quite literally.
Yeah.
But if you actually know anyone who no one has those experiences smoking weed. That's like crystal meth, sure.
Probably, which is a white drug, by the way.
We didn't come up with, we were just trying to enjoy our plants and chill.
That shit.
But after that, I think there's a lot. Yes. So for now, cannabis is my big focus. I also work in psychedelics, helping to advocate for the people because I believe in the medicinal power of this.
Okay.
Because I don't believe people should have to go get their brain sliced into to find relief from chronic migraines.
At least not as a second option.
Yeah, right.
We should exhaust all of our options.
We also don't need that first option of let's go through a full stack of medications with all of these side effects that we don't really know which one's going to work. Why can't we start with a plant? Why can't we start with something that's totally natural? You don't even have to smoke it. Like, even just the leaves have vitamins and nutrients in it. It's crazy. So I guess for the community, teas. And that's what we were doing. Like, there was a tribe in Mexico for the longest part in Puebla that they didn't smoke the bud, they ate the bud. There's acids in the nugs. Like, so there's lipids, fats, acids. Those are things that your brain uses, like fatty acids, vitamins, all sorts of minerals and nutrients in the bud and the leaves of the plant. So it's not all psychoactive. And all we're asking, all the industry wants from the legislators in Texas is help us regulate it so we can create good shepherd policies to protect the people. Mostly what they're worried about in the Bible Belt is the kids. They're like, it's the devil's lettuce and it'll corrupt all the kids.
Right.
Well, no one who really wants to operate in this business wants to sell to kids. That's like a big tobacco myth. And yeah, they did that. That is part of our real history. That did happen. They were marketing to kids. By the way, so are Fruit Loops. Like all of the food that we're seeing right now with the sugar and all of the chemicals that are in it. Yeah. They're all marketing to kids. The cannabis industry does not want your kids. We don't. It's just no.
Yeah.
It's there. I don't know a single operator where that's an idea. Yeah, because we don't need it.
I think late teenagers are probably looking for it because of the escapism. Probably
as soon as you make it legal, actually, teenage use has dropped in states. Really? Not in states where it's prohibited. In states where it's allowed.
So Denver, California, Washington, Oregon have seen a decrease? Yeah.
If your mom is smoking weed, is that cool anymore?
I don't want to do what mom is doing. That's crazy.
Well, she's going to invite you too because like a mom, you'll
let's do it together. Yeah.
Do you want to have a smoke?
Let's watch.
Go away, Mom.
Let's watch Pineapple Express and
or coming down and hang out with you and your friends in the basement.
And also like millennials are parents now, right? Like
exactly.
these.
And if we're approaching it as a medicine, like if we're approaching it as an herbal supplement, a nutraceutical, or in some cases a medicine that is prescribed by a doc, then like. I don't know. I wasn't one of those kids who was like, yeah, let's drink the cough syrup. It's cough syrup and you can get high on that shit. Like, I wasn't one of those kids. I think most kids aren't. I have 2 teenage boys. They know a ton about cannabis because of the work that I do. And they have no interest. They already told me, well, Mom, I know that my frontal cortex isn't developed until the age of 24. And
that's
that
crazy
if I consume, well, because they know the science. If we educate the people, the people will respond.
I remember when I was in high school, like lean was such a big thing. And we looked for it, but we looked for it because it was cool because we idolized these rappers. It wasn't because like we were looking for relief or anything like that. It was like a lifestyle choice, right? Like
grape juice, man.
Yeah. But so in that sense, I understand how like teenagers are perceptible. They are always going to be the face of counterculture
with anything.
So, but I think that it's important to understand. I mean, like teenagers also search for alcohol.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
But is alcohol completely illegal?
Correct. At least, and then nobody's telling alcohol manufacturers and companies that they're marketing to children. They clearly aren't. And when a 18-year-old is looking for alcohol, it's on them. It's not
And we need to
it's not
make
like Johnny
sure-
Walker gets like, you know, the mob right outside of their distillery because of
Exactly.
because of
Or they're
children,
setting up a bar across from a school.
right.
And that is where we do have to have cannabis operators. So most of the hemp operators in Texas are real good folks. They're real country folks. They're good. They're from here. There are a lot of Latino operators.
Yeah.
There are a lot of, you know, Texans. And there are a lot of folks who aren't from Texas at all. Like they came here because people come to Texas for a dream sometimes. Sometimes it's a little more accessible to actually have one here. Although that's questionable depending on
that's for
which
another
side
one.
which side of the fence you're coming from. But there's a lot of good people in the industry. They want to do good things, and we're calling on other operators to also be good partners, because if you're not, we don't want you in our industry. Like if you're going to sell to kids, we want you to, we want enforcement for that. If you're going to put something by a school, that's bad. That's nefarious. We're not doing that kind of shit. We're trying to help people. We're trying to help the nation, and we're trying to help the state get past this stuff. Because frankly, the real reason why I think it's still prohibited has nothing to do with public health and everything to do with mass incarceration. As soon as you...
Oh, so you think big prison is behind...
I think it was for
effort.
a very long time. And now as we found other ways to incarcerate people at a rate, that cannabis enforcement is less so, but it was a major factor.
Yeah, the prison industrial complex is crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
And once you set the foundation for a belief, it persists even if years after you have data and science that shows contradictory information. So we have a couple of issues that we need to fix. I think cannabis is one of the easiest ones that we could set up, remove the prohibition, set up simple regulations, let Texans, actually in the state of Texas, the hemp industry already employs about 50,000 people. It's a $5 billion industry already.
In Texas or?
In Texas.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Ha ha ha. Everyone's like, oh, New York's projected for their $3 billion, or Cali's going to have this many millions. We have a very big market
Robust, yeah.
already here in Texas because of what they did with hemp. Because of the hemp rules, THCA is not THC, it's THCA. So we're able to sell legally these products because it's not the molecule that they banned. And the hemp bill allows hemp. Hemp and cannabis are the same thing. But by legal definition, they are not. So we have a cannabis industry in Texas.
Yeah.
The legislators are now aware they did that. They're trying to walk it back, but we've got 50,000 Texans who are directly employed by the industry. That's not to mention ancillary service providers, including myself, who are all supporting those 50,000 folks. So you had a whole lot more beyond that. And those hemp businesses, they do pay taxes. That's a lot of tax money.
Yeah.
So if we prohibit it, we're putting all that $5 billion all underground back into the illicit market. It doesn't make any kind of sense. Not money sense, not common sense.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, it's tough though. I think right now the real conversation is trying to connect with folks and have an open dialogue to help especially, Senator Charles Perry. I want to be his best friend, but because he's the one who really wants to ban all this, and he's the one I need to really speak to. I need to understand what are his constituents' fear. What is the fear that's holding it back?
Right.
Because the foundation of racial propaganda is a big piece of the history.
Right.
But what's holding us up now is, like I said earlier, it's a purple issue. Most of the Republicans actually are on board and they want to do this. They're being held hostage by some of their constituents who are exceptionally conservative or religious.
Right.
And it's a small but very loud minority. So
They always are small and loud.
that's, I think, the thing that we can all do as a community, though, is get a little more loud, but get loud in the way. I love the protesting in the streets, all that stuff, as long as we're, following the rules. Because I can't, look, I was in the military. I know how bad, I went to Afghanistan. I know how bad, and I went to Honduras. I know how bad things can get when shit hits the fan. I do not want that for the American public. So, I understand sometimes when, like, back when we had Antifa, I don't think that's still a thing, or if it is, they've quieted down quite a bit.
Not sure.
But when we had Antifa and other organizations protesting and doing so violently, like, I get the teachings of Malcolm X to an extent, but I also respect the teachings of Martin Luther King and Cesar Chavez. And the nonviolent path, the legal path, is the path we have to kind of try to choose over and over again, because the path of violence, we get nowhere fast. Mm-hmm. Like, it leads to situations that we're in right now. This is like aggressively violent, what's happening right now to our people. And we need to protest and be out there. But more than that, more than like go protest with your sign, go meet with your legislator. Like, put some action, put some meat on that bone. Because I can appreciate a good protest, but I'll be real honest with you. That does something for a quick 15-minute media spotlight and nothing else.
I was just talking to a friend of mine yesterday because he called me. We're trying to put something together, and I told him that I'm like, see, and this is part of why this going back to functions, right? Like what my function is. I have a lot of friends that are very loud protesters, and that they're like Instagram social justice warriors and things like that. And I always get back to them. I'm like, man, I love what you guys are doing, but you also have to remember, like, if you do not have political capital, you cannot get this done. Mm-hmm. Like, you just can't. It doesn't matter how loud you are or how many times you're out there. You could die of starvation out there if you do not have any sort of lobbying effort.
Literally, people set themselves on fire.
Yeah, like, you could literally be out there for years. If you do not figure out a way to create some sort of lobbying effort to get people in the rooms where these decisions are being made and to advocate for you, mm-hmm. it will not happen. And I understand how that's hard, because as a protester, you have as somebody that has a social cause and you protest against it, it's seen in a very specific way. And to the normal person, the protester is noble. It's a noble cause, right?
It's a noble first step.
Right. The moment that you become a politician or a lobbyist, all of a sudden now you're looked at with the politician's eye, right? Now you're looked at like, oh, you're just a politician. But you need politicians. You need the lobbyists to be on your side, because they actually have the political capital and the wherewithal to know what rooms to get into, so that they can then start finessing what they need to finesse. Is it a moral issue for some people that they don't want to be a politician? 100%, but somebody's got to do it.
Well, politicians have been... The word has been like corrupted.
Correct.
Because it's really you're a public servant.
Exactly.
Are they right now?
Exactly.
I don't know.
I mean, like, yeah, there's plenty corrupt politicians. There's plenty corrupt activists.
The more of us who do it,
yeah.
There's
I mean?
so many corrupt activists.
There's plenty corrupt activists. There's plenty
nonprofits 100%. With huge salaries 100%. That are all about
100%.
And I'm not saying don't go protest, because I love seeing the community together, and I do think gathering in spaces together, sharing our stories, creates an energy, and also you talk to each other, you share ideas. You
I'm not saying not to do that either. What I'm saying is do that, but then also be aware of how government works, so that you can then put other people in position to do the rest of the fight, because a lot of the fight happens behind closed doors. Martin Luther King brought 1 million people to that march, but he had Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel there. He had a big Jewish movement behind him. He was able to get people on his behalf into rooms that he was not being a part of, so that he can get his message across. He was an incredibly great. He was a great activist, but an incredibly great political tactician, that he knew how to put people in certain places.
And I think that comes also from it seemed that one thing that was different for him was this mindset of servant leadership, so that you're not prioritizing your ego. You got to be in the room. You got to be the one having the conversation.
And he was flawed, which to me makes him even better. Like, he was flawed. He had a lot of very deep problems when it comes to his personal life, and
we all do,
right? So we all do, right? And it doesn't.
I think we need to start separating that out a little bit more.
Sure.
Like, of course, if you're doing like horrible, like you rape someone, that's bad,
right? Yeah.
But our heroes are humans. They're gonna fuck up.
Yeah.
What I think is gonna help society get better, including like the lobbyists, the politicians, all of it, is knowing we're gonna mess up. and wanting to still do better,
Right.
like acknowledging it and being comfortable with, oops, I messed up and it could be public. Like, I think the thing about why cancel culture works so well is because shame in our country is so huge.
Yeah.
And you can shame anyone into any kind of complicity.
Right.
Like,
Except for us. That's why I'm calling myself
that's why we're degenerates.
that's why we're degenerates of but like you're not gonna shame me,
Mexican
dog. Yeah, we're not gonna
degenerates.
we're not gonna feel shame over here.
No.
At least not in that kind of way.
Well, once you get past that and you get really comfortable with being like, oh shit, I messed that one up. Let's take a look at the problem and see where we can do it different. Once you get comfortable with that, you start going through the iterations a lot faster. And for my political activists, you really got to get comfortable with that, because even if you don't like the government, this is still the rule set.
Yeah.
This is still the game that we're playing. Until we can't change the game.
You're in that system whether you like it or not.
Yeah. So here we are in the United States of America. We operate under their laws. And that's crazy coming from me as a cannabis. I work in cannabis and psychedelics. But I have to say, like, you have to be a part of structuring the regulation and the people. I think the one thing that we'll see is big government and big corporations are going to control some of those platforms, like what we saw with TikTok. But we can still create and put our content out there, put our voices out there, because TikTok, IG, all of it didn't start with Zuck or Elon. It started with the people enjoying a product and making it something else.
Right.
Instagram was not what it is today.
Right.
It was a photo app for photographers to share their artsy photos.
Yeah.
That's it. And now it's influencing news, and literally a TikTok ban held half of the nation hostage.
Right.
Like, captured their attention and influenced geopolitical conversations. That's insane.
Yeah.
But it's also a good thing, because it means
powerful.
It is.
We unfortunately have to wrap up, but I want to say that we should continue this conversation. We should put a pin in it so that we can continue having it, because I feel like as time goes by, we're going to be able to pick this conversation back up and add more nuances to it, and or hyper focus on very specific points. Or as time passes and things happen, we can come back and give people updates. I want to make sure that I give you an ability and a platform, open invitation whenever you want to come in and have a conversation, whether it's about cannabis or whether you want to join us in any other topic that we're talking about. We have some plans together to work together outside of being on camera, putting together events and things like that, not cannabis related. Just some of them are adjacent. Some of the, I think our relationship, our friendship, our partnership is going to continue growing. So if you really liked this conversation, if you really enjoyed us having a conversation with each other, then you're probably going to see a lot more in the future of us kind of being in the same rooms, and then more conversations about this. Again, open invite whenever you want.
Thank you.
And then I also think it's going to be really important to get your Hispanic, Latin, Chicano, Tejana perspective. I want to dive into that a lot more.
Oh, yeah.
As the political climate becomes a lot more convoluted and very loud and very propagandized in the next, what I feel it's going to be for the next couple years. I'm starting, this segment, which I'm debuting it now I'm talking about it, and you'll get to hear it. I really like the word undocumented for some reason. So I'm calling a segment undocumented, and what I'm doing is have you ever seen Soft White Underbelly?
Oh yeah, I
okay,
love
so
it.
I want to do Soft White Underbelly-esque videos, but talking only to highlight immigrant stories, like the beauty of the immigrant story. And I'm trying to tap into immigrants from all walks of life that have come here and contributed to this country. A lot of the propaganda that's coming in, again, goes back to where I feel like my function is. A lot of the propaganda that comes in terms of villainizing us, calling us degenerates, calling this and that, blah, blah. A lot of that coming in is very effective, and I've noticed that it's been very effective for decades. And I feel like the only way that I can contribute is to bring art to the table, and the only way that I bring art to the table is to highlight some of these stories and to humanize them. If you're going to villainize people, I'm going to humanize them.
I love that.
So I have a segment that I'm working on where I'm going to do a very documentary style, very cinematic style interviews with people just sharing their story and the power of their story. And and not just so that they could kind of like immortalize their story and have it live somewhere, but that so other people can come in and hear these stories and say, wow, like we are very diverse and we didn't know it. We've affected a lot of economies, we've affected a lot of communities, and we wouldn't even know it. We're in every sector of the capitalist market in the United States, and we wouldn't even know it.
I'm not gonna, it's speculative, but Latinos were positioned to become the majority in this country. So it's very interesting to me what's happening right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And mind you,
does 1 + 1 equal 2?
So mind you, I also want to say out there's a lot of Latinos that don't agree with each other. There's a lot of, like, we're not a monolith either.
No, there's plenty of them who are excited about what's happening.
Right. And I'm not trying to invalidate them either, even if I don't agree with them. But what I'm trying to do is really bring out the sheer diversity of our piece of the blanket of the United States. And I'm trying to do that in a way where it's not colored by political jargon. It's not colored by the stereotype or the caricature that's been placed over us. It's kind of taking it back for a second and saying, like, look, if I'm going to be able to produce something, I want to produce something where I have a way of characterizing this the way that I see it, the way that I know that it can be characterized, as opposed to letting a foreign agent, to pun intended, right? Letting a foreign agent control the narrative of the people that look like me.
Well, and I think that's going to be the power of what you're doing, and the power of us moving away.
It's called undocumented, but it's not because I'm looking at stories of undocumented people legally. I'm calling it undocumented because the story of the citizen, the third generation Hispanic, hasn't been documented.
That's exactly it.
You know what I mean? Like the story of the farmer.
The government had it, but now the people have it.
Right. So I'm calling it undocumented as a pun, as like a flip on the word, because I'm not going to have people on camera for very obvious reasons of people that are not here legally. I'm going to have people on camera that are 100% here legally, are American citizens, that you've never heard their story and how they contribute to how they also get placed in this box, and they also get villainized despite the fact that they have contributed a lot to every community that they've been a part of, small and large, right?
Well, my grandfather was undocumented for many years, but his daughter served in the military, and I served in the military, and his son served in the military.
Maybe we can start with you.
Oh shit!
We can start with you, but I want to make it like really cinematic and poetic, and I'm trying to make it like really nice, because I feel like we deserve it. I feel like the people, Tejanos, Chicanos, from people from LA, from Chicago, people from all walks of life that have come to this country and created subcultures after subculture, contributed to pop culture and never got credit for it. Like all of these things, I feel are incredibly important, and so I'm calling it undocumented because there's just no record. There's no record of it anywhere. So I want to create my own digital database of people, my own weird stories, like Hispanic family tree. So,
I love it. I love it. It's so needed right now.
Yeah, I think so.
And this is the time for it. Like, this is the time for the people to share their voices. Now we're realizing news media doesn't have that platform. It really is on individual creators like you to help tell these stories, to help create normalization, and to help create a space where we can have conversations even when we disagree. Yeah. And I think that's the thing we need the most.
Of course. Well, that being said, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
We can't wait to have you back. And we can't wait to have many more conversations about cannabis and about other things, because I think it'll be fun. That's it for this episode. Thank you guys. Please remember to like, share, subscribe, share it to everybody if you like it. If you dislike it, share it even more, because it helps. So just talk hella shit.
Yeah, if you don't like it.
If you don't like it, just write it on there that you didn't like it.
Cut that.
Just write it on there, talk hella shit. But we really appreciate your help. This entire enterprise, this entire function is entirely self-funded at the current moment. So everything that you see, everything that we put together, we do ourselves. So any support that you guys want to give us, or any support, any like, any share, any subscription, really, really, really goes a long way, and we appreciate you in advance. Thank you guys so much, and until next time, see you later.